So, what is this master data that runs up and down? Probably the easiest way that it's been explained to me is that master data is the big nouns used in describing our business processes and the things we want to manage. Big nouns. That's a really sort of abstract way to talk about it. But I think folks in data warehousing have been talking about this a lot. We talk about dimensions, being nouns, and there's all kinds of different semantic mapping systems onto dimensions versus facts, which are, transactional. So facts are coming in here, and where are these nouns, right? So what kind of nouns are we talking about? Let's go back to our example. Brian bought a blue bike from Tom as a sales lead at this branch. Brian feels like a big noun, right? And you kind of read this and you make the assumption Brian is customer number C12451, right? So Brian, customer, more abstractly, person, probably a big noun. So person, bought, it's kind of a verb, right? Blue, it's an adjective. It describes a bike. Oof. Brian bought a bike. Bike is a noun. It's probably a big noun because this is a product that we sell. So person and product are two primary master data entities. You'll note that the product has a specific model number, so E3650. You can imagine that it has a serial number because it's an e-bike, right? It's a very fancy e-bike. So it's got batteries and there's all kinds of regulatory requirements around traceability, and there's manufacturing, bill of materials, and traceability systems down here. Bike, product and the associated BOM and all the things with it. Second really big master data entity. What do you sell? And what you sell, the product that you transact on, it's going to be like, this is transcendent here because you're going to find references to that product. You're going to find references to E3650 in all kinds of systems. Master data, it's everywhere. Similarly, customer numbers, right? You find customer numbers all over the place. We bought it from Tom, another person that we're mastering, but Tom is an employee, has an HR number, HR 957. So we're still mastering people, but a lot of times we think about mastering employees. Oftentimes we'll model employees in different systems than we'll model customers. From a mastering standpoint, this starts to get interesting. What happens when you sell to your employees? Then they become customers, right? What happens if one of your employees starts to sell you something? Then they become a vendor. So I don't have vendor in this example, but vendor is another really big noun in the master data space that we usually track. Vendor will be, all through your stack here. As a sales lead, this feels very descriptive, right? Like, so maybe this is like, we're talking about mini master data, right? Maybe this is and just another adjective. Here's a date. I said before, say it all the time, dates are really hard. Oftentimes at this level, you'll find people that are, pre-modeling, huge date dimensions with all kinds of extra attributes and calendar, magic, right? At this level, we're usually just storing timestamps, right? And this is one of those like immediate challenges is how did you model date and time down across all your transactional systems and normalizing that onto a single, right, like time dimension up here. So a few strategies, but a common pattern in a weird master data element that is in almost every single transaction that we're going to track. At branch location X, so we don't know where I bought this bike yet, but location is interesting. Most businesses have multiple locations. Maybe you do manufacturing in one country and distribution in three other countries and sales in a couple other countries and OEMs in another country. Location becomes a critical master data element, right? Many of your transactions are going to end up needing to be tied to a location. And in a lot of cases, you'll end up with transactional data systems scattered across different geographies. They don't inherently tell you what their location is. So when you bring them to this information layer, you're actually going to be adding some master data in there to normalize so that we know where the transactions came from location wise, not just source system wise. Like location is, we'll look up here in a minute. Like location is big. We buy buildings and things, right? Missing an owner's manual. Owner's manual, right? Like that's probably not like master data. It might be tied in down here to the bill of materials. So it feels like maybe the owner's manual should have went in the box. And so it's tied in here. So maybe I can figure out what one I'm supposed to get based on the serial number, right? I could kind of go look it up. Okay. The way this reads though, Brian bought this blue bike from Tom and it's missing the owner's manual. It turns out the way this came in from a data standpoint was as a product complaint. So this came into customer service. This isn't some random fact. This is nowhere stated in here that the origin of this clearly described transaction, the origin of this is actually that it's a complaint and the customer is expressing dissatisfaction. And so from a data standpoint, maybe this is in the customer service system, maybe it's in your CRM, but there's a question about, well, how do we categorize this complaint? From an information layer, are we getting lots of complaints with missing manuals, right? Or is this like a 1 in a million thing that just happened to me? So you see, we can play Where's Waldo and we can find master data, master data, master data, master data, kind of, master data, right? And what's interesting about master data is that, you have it, some of it's bad and it's everywhere, right? So whether it's in the order processing system where I originally bought the bike, whether it's in the manufacturing system where they made the bike, whether it was in the planning system where they designed the bike, things like serial numbers and part numbers and customer numbers, these identifiers for individual systems at the data level end up needing to be rectified, right? Like we talk about customer data platforms. A huge amount of customer data platform is simply taking multiple, data sources down here at the transactional level, or you're buying sort of information at a bulk level, and you're trying to find common identifiers and tie things together. You're trying to go find other events, right? So website clicks and things like that, trying to bring that transactional together to get a more coherent picture. But everything when we're up here, right? I mean, this was a big key for me when I really got into analytics, was the master data elements and their attributes, right? So let's talk about, I bought the blue bike. We know that this serial number was blue. But maybe we want to write a report that says, how are bikes selling by color? The by color and by size, by geography, right? Like these are the very common things. But what did I just say? I want to find transaction about bikes. I want to filter them by an attribute, right? So the blue is probably an attribute of the master data. And you see this in master data systems. So we see the master data and their attributes tying together these transactions all through the ecosystem. And it's worth really thinking about this, right? Like when somebody's describing their requirements, they're often giving you clues about which master data elements. And then in thinking about, particularly at the analytics layer, they give you requirements for analytics, and you should immediately be kind of mentally mapping to, oh, well, you said you want to analyze something about customers and you want to do by color. So I've got to bring in bikes. And maybe we want to bring in complaints, right? So I've got to bring in complaints, for what kind of complaints we're having from a customer service standpoint. Now I can get information. I can use that information to figure out we're getting lots of complaints about missing owner's manuals. I can go back down into here and I can say, wow, model 350 seems to be a real problem. Like we do a graph on which models are getting complaints about owner's manuals. This model is the bad one. We come down here, we look in the instructions for manufacturing, and it turns out that we forgot to tell the people putting things in the box to put the manual in the box. And we've been shipping lots of them without manuals. Apparently not everybody's complaining. Some people are just going to the website and downloading them. So now we've traced from data, we got a complaint. We joined data from multiple systems. We got it up into an analytical system. We did some analysis to figure out, which product we were getting complaints about and why. Then we went back into a transactional / master data system in that we dug all the way down to this bill of materials and we figured out the problem, right? Now we've fixed a data management system, future transactions, right? Future bikes that are being shipped won't be missing their owner's manual. So we see now, hopefully, master data and information models going back and forth between applications and analytics, and that kind of virtuous loop. You can see here we have people and number of systems. The number of systems is bigger down here on the data handling side. We're inherently trying to consolidate as we move up, right? We're consolidating the information. We're consolidating the number of systems too. So we should have far less information systems and integration systems, aggregation systems than we do transactional processing. And the number of people using them, right? Like directly using them, is it, changes, right? So you're trying to impact more people with less systems here. The number of information elements gets smaller. Data tends to be very complicated. We have lots of conversations about data and its implementation in all the various systems we have. The information model, we're really starting to talk in requirements and business language. We're not talking about the difference between int64 and int32, which we'll have a debate about that down here sometimes. At the information model, we say, hey, it's a number, right? And oftentimes people aren't even as specific as whether it's floating point or not, right? So there's a real fidelity conversation, and many of our requirements are going to be expressed at this information layer, and then we're going to translate down into all kinds of data systems. So we have a lot of master data system. We have data models. By the way, this is why I said this is data modeling, because there's a lot of different data models in these layers that we're putting together. Let's go one more. We often don't see as much of this. So this says OLAP, online analytical processing. If you get a bunch of this together, right? Like there's this logical thing that says knowledge. This is usually like people talk about this is a description of reality. This is our best capture of reality. This is contextualized. This will tell you context. So this will tell you how reality is going. This is, in theory, going to tell you what's going to happen next, right? So the leap from here to here is, some people talk about descriptive versus prescriptive, or descriptive versus predictive. You're getting into the, hey, what should I do? Right. So I was able to gather a bunch of data. I was able to aggregate it into some system, and I figured out that something has violated some business rule. Right. What should I do with it? Oftentimes now what we're trying to do is loop that knowledge back. The right thing to do, loop that knowledge back down into a transactional system. Whether we're talking about embedded analytics or reverse ETL, there's a whole bunch of like marketing terms. The idea that you can like walk up the stack, get to new information to drive a better business process, and then feed it back down into these transaction processing systems. That's like the big loop that a lot of us are going after. A lot of people are going after. Finally, you get to wisdom, right? Like, which is, go read the Wikipedia page or go read some academic articles. They talk about what should you do, right? Like what's going to, it's very sort of ephemeral. And we're not really going to talk about it in this model. We model all the way up to knowledge usually. And then we kind of stop, right? So that covers the main layers. It talks about how master data goes all the way through here, right? So like here is everything that a customer did. Here is analytics by customer and product. Now we're getting into what's the customer going to do next, right? Like what product is going to sell next better. Now, we're getting into all kinds of other, esoteric questions. Okay. So that's like the business stack, but let's talk about the next layer of the stack, which is enterprise master data. And I think this one is really interesting and ties a bunch of other pieces together. It's informative about some challenges down here.